I'm very happy to be here with you talking about contemporary Czech cinema. And I'm especially happy to be able to speak about the film Old-Timers, Staříci, directed by Martin Dušek and Ondřej Provazník. The film premiered last year at the Karlovy Vary Film Festival. For those who know, this is a t-shirt from there. I'm wearing in honor of the festival. Unfortunately, this year it's been canceled, this edition, but they have a wonderful program for audiences in all over Czech Republic. So hopefully next year we are reconvened there. And I'm really glad that I can introduce my guests tonight. I'll go alphabetically. So I will start with Nick Bruno. Nick is the Public Cinema Programs Manager for SIFF Cinema, which is the Seattle International Film Festival, where he's also a member of the programming team. He's a lifelong cinephile. He cut his teeth in programming behind the counter of multiple video stores. He was a film buyer in Berkeley, but he spent a lot of time promoting and cinema and curating at the Portland International Film Festival and Northwest Film Center, where we have met over several programs. Hello, Nick. How are you? Great to see you.
Hello, Irena.
Wonderful.
Thanks for having me on the program tonight.
Great. And our second guest is Josh Gardner. He's a founder of the Cinema Le Monde. It's a nonprofit that fosters cross-culture understanding through the power of world cinema. It's based in Metro Detroit. And he recently co-founded now I'm missing the name. It's
the Film Lab.
The Film Lab. Hey, Josh, thanks for filling in. It's a microcinema, and it's also, of course, in Detroit. And he is also, we met while programming together. He was at the AFI Film and Cultural Center in the larger DC area. It's in Silver Spring, Maryland. And he also worked for the Silver Dogs Festival and the Washington Jewish Film Festival. He's a specialist in Spanish language cinema, and we've spent a lot of time talking about world cinema together. And so I'm very glad that I was able to get both of them to watch Czech cinema, and that we'll talk about it. I will say a little about the filmmakers. This is their first fiction feature film collaboration that they work together on different, on a couple documentary film, feature films that they won a lot of awards for. And they had, they met at a film at the School of Journalism before they delved into cinema. So you can definitely see that in their work, that they are very much for them addressing important topics that are important for people in Czech Republic or hopefully worldwide is really on top of their list. And so with their first feature film, a feature fiction film, that was a topic that they actually were working on for a long time. It took them a little while to get financing, but it's basically rooted in contemporary Czech society issues. And so since I started introducing Nick, I will start with Josh asking what was your experience of the film? What did you take from it? How would you see that as an American?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a really beautiful film, and something that really struck me, I watched an interview with the filmmakers, and they obviously said it related very closely to contemporary Czech society and issues that have been faced there, but they also said it could have taken place in any country that's dealt with some of these same issues where justice hasn't been served. The example they gave was the Pinochet regime in Chile or other places. So they it was very specifically Czech, but it was also very universal. So that made it very relatable to an American audience, I think, especially with what we're going through right now, where people are starting to question if justice is duly served and if it exists in our country. So it was really moving to kind of see the relevance of that, and I really enjoyed the film.
That's great to hear that. And was there anything, Nick, that really stood out for you, or was there something that you maybe did not relate to or didn't understand, or was there something that you actually wouldn't be able to sort of relate to?
Well, I wanted to seize upon something that Josh sort of mentioned, and that's the connection to other societies that have had these similar issues play out within them, specifically Pinochet and Chile. And I was just thinking of, while watching it, I was thinking of a couple of different films. I was thinking of like The Silence of Others, the film about Franco in Spain. And I was thinking about the Patricio Guzman trilogy of documentaries that started with Nostalgia for the Light and this year ended with Cordillera of Dreams. So I thought it was really interesting that this pair of filmmakers who are traditionally documentary filmmakers, when they would finally make their first narrative feature, would still keep it in a space of social realism. And then I also was really struck by the sort of the melange or the pastiche at play within this film, in that you don't get one type of film with this movie. You're not hit over the head with the dark, stark reality at play that's at play in the backstory. There is humor throughout, and I thought that was really remarkable, that interplay between multiple genres.
Yeah, genre. I mean, I was thinking like this road movie thing. There couldn't be anything more American than a road movie, and I thought this, however, bringing you to one of the reasons where actually they place all their films or most of their films in which is the northwestern Bohemia on the border with Germany, that is a place of quite a lot of sort of historical turmoil, that it was just somehow American genre with a very Czech twist, and the authenticity of the film, and especially the portrayal of the life of these old gentlemen who have this incredible huge task that they put in front of themselves, that obviously is something that only they could execute, but then the execution is just such a cumbersome affair. I mean, it was just to me it was quite heartbreaking to see their bodies sort of failing them oftentimes, but at the same time the resolve and everything that was really so well kind of delivered by the actors, by the directors, by the entire form. I thought it was just fantastic.
Yeah, and I would say that specifically the reason why I thought of The Silence of Others was because this film portrays two characters that are not ready to let go of something that their society wants to push down and forget about. And I found that really fascinating as well.
Yeah, one of the things that stuck out to me was kind of how the younger generations were dealing and were relating to what they were going through, whether it was kind of like the people who owned the ranch where they stole the gun, who kind of had no idea what was going on, in relation to the daughter of the man they were trying to kill, who seemed to be aware of her father's past and more aware of what was going on and the implications of his actions. So kind of the legacy of what had happened.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think that was the filmmaker were very keen on addressing the fact that they were not there to make sort of like a political pamphlet. This film, should have many different levels on which you can relate to the characters, and the old age, and then the whole the way how the different generations deal with what is so much at stake for them, and then it seems like nobody else cares, and they know nobody else cares. That was as much as topic as the frailty of their relationships, of their of their bodies, of whatever you witness on their personal sort of struggle in a way, even if this huge the revenge is a looming thing, especially for one of the characters, for Vlasta. The other one sort of just buried it, and it just comes back. And I thought that it was just so perfectly delivered. And when I saw the film in Karlovy last year at the premiere, I was very grateful that the film didn't fall for this thing that is often happens in not only Czech cinema, but especially in Czech cinema, where the filmmakers just want to entertain, and so the kind of lightening up the mood, not to make it too heavy, it just to me kind of sells cheaply the rest of the movie. And here they just really stuck to their guns and really continued with that, and I found it incredibly effective.
I think I also questioned the entire time I was watching it whether or not they were actually going to go through with the crime,
Right.
or the justice, depending on how you view it.
Yes.
Because of that lightness within the script.
Yes, I mean they were. To me, when I saw the film, I thought that they left this space for you to maybe hope that it didn't happen. At least that's where, when I was walking out, that I felt like, like there is not the death on screen, that you don't see it. But when I said that during the Q&A, I was the filmmakers said that absolutely he killed him. So my hope was crushed, even though, of course, that's just, I didn't go through the history. I didn't have the same experience as the two characters. Obviously, I was not, put in jail. I didn't go through the hard labor camps that they did. And, as the filmmakers say, I just cannot judge them for whatever they did. And the idea was there. And it was based on a real life story of two prisoners who are former political prisoners who had that plan. Unfortunately, though, one of them died before they could have actually done it. But the villain, Mr. Mraz, is based on a communist prosecutor, Karel Vaš, who was put on trial after the Velvet Revolution, but the system just did not deal with it to the satisfaction of the political prisoners. He was just not even convicted. So it was just something that was very present, a present debate, let's say, at the time. And there were other films that were actually made on the topic, but this was to me, on a dramatic level, this was just a superb delivery. Josh, did you have something else?
Yeah, I think one of the things that made it so universal, as you mentioned, they did give a lot of space in. If you aren't so familiar with the history, they kind of leave you breadcrumbs along the way until the final scene where he kind of tells you what the crimes that the man has committed. So you can really relate to it on kind of a simple revenge narrative and kind of understand what they're going through without understanding the specifics about all the history. So I think coming from a person who's not super familiar with the Czech history, you can still totally relate to the journey that the characters are going through. And it wasn't super essential to understand and appreciate the film.
Yes, I would like to ask the audience that is quite plentiful we have, if you would like to put a question in the chat, please do. We will follow the chat, and then sort of I will relate your question, and we'll hopefully be able to answer. But while I ask Nick to tell me a little more about how maybe you could compare. I basically gave you a task, both of you, actually, to actually see another film that was presented at the Czech Film Festival, which was a film by Bohdan Karásek called Karel, You and Me, Karel, Já a ty, Karel, Me and You, actually. And, and I have to fix a technical issue I'm having, so please don't mind me and speak.
Yeah, it was an interesting assignment, as you put it, in that I think my personal context, not being by any means a scholar within the field of Czech film, has been more experimental works in my viewing, things that were a part of either the Czech New Wave or works by Jan Svankmajer, things that really pushed envelopes and really maybe didn't offer the sort of breadcrumb trail that Josh spoke of. And so to see two films that were, I think, very relatable in terms of genre signposts was quite interesting. Like Karel was more based in, I think my immediate reaction was that it was similar to like Richard Linklater's Before trilogy, or maybe some of the mumblecore works. Being in Seattle, of course, we just lost Lynn Shelton, sadly. So I thought of her stuff. So I think another thread that you could tie between the two is, again, that's ability or willingness to just sort of buck convention or genre specifics. Old Timers, for instance, if you were going to get that story in an American production, specifically a studio production, I can imagine it either fitting in the camp of either something like Spielberg's Munich, or you would get Grumpy Old Men. You're not going to get a combination of the two. It feels like most American films that are reaching audiences are definitely products and are definitely not as nuanced. They're clearly about identifiable signposts.
Mm-hmm. That's a very interesting point. I did when I was preparing for this, I was trying to see how would you compare this film with sort of the more popular Czech cinema and more popular Czech films, let's say, that are the biggest box office success, and those are comedies. And I think that's why I think that filmmakers usually sort of shy away from delivering such a let's say strong delivery in the in showing a controversial act, for instance, or actually kind of presenting something that people actually have to take a stand toward. Like, do you actually agree with that kind of revenge, or are you actually willing to even go there and discuss that issue? That's something that is unusual, and it's interesting what you're saying is like that in America you have these also like just this kind of nuanced film would not fare that well in sort of the on the scene. Maybe it's refreshing to see that it actually can deliver so well.
Yeah, I mean, I think speaking again to Josh's comment about a breadcrumb trail, it just it feels like with Old Timers, what makes it so compelling is that it's based entirely in the lives of the two characters. It's not about the action. It's not about plot points or overarching drama. It's about seeing them get from point A to point B, and it doesn't really matter. You don't need to have the knife under the table like in a Hitchcock film to build the tension or to create the interest.
And perhaps that comes from their documentary filmmaking background that led them to not rely so heavily on those narrative beats that might be overly familiar.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that I'm pretty much convinced about that, but it's also in the meantime, while they were preparing this film, one of the directors actually became quite a frequent guest director, or not guest director, but directed many episodes on dramatic TV series. So there is a very clear proficiency with the dramatic genre in this film present. And there were interesting points that Martin Dušek, one of the directors, brought out about how they, of course, were very keen on also showing the area where this film is taking place, and sort of hint with the background what they are talking about. For instance, that there are all these beautifully painted walls, but they are just basically empty behind, and they hide this uncomfortable truth or uncomfortable past, and it's kind of taken away from whatever people are not comfortable of talking about, and like kind of it's all this hidden. And this apparently the idea of the film came about when they were shooting a documentary in this area called the town called Hermitage. And they actually, while shooting, met this staunch old communist man who used to be a director of a factory, and he was completely unwilling to sort of reflect on his own past or on the past of the country. And they apparently got into a big argument with him while shooting, and that sort of meeting that kind of a man kind of gave them an idea of this is a topic that we want to address, and that combined with the other topic just made that film. We have a couple questions, so let me go. What is the earliest film to address the topic of regime revenge following the Czech communist period? That's a question for somebody with encyclopedic memory that I am not. But there is, I would say that revenge is not such a big topic for Czechs. I must say that I think that Czechs are not very much willing to kind of, how to say that, go so much against the grain. I don't think that revenge is so present in Czech psyche, but that's just me being a Czech, and it's maybe me. But yes, there was a film that was made about the same topic, about Karel Vaš, the prosecutor, and that about this story, which was heavily publicized in the 2000s. So the story of this man who had this plan of the revenge. There were revenges during. I don't know if there were revenges though. That's the thing. It's like there were people who were actually willing to take up arms and fight, with the communist regimes, etc. But I don't think revenge is such a strong element in the Czech history. There is another, the question was from David Wilder, and another note here from Mark Brumble. Guys, you should help me to pronounce that name. Josh, how would you pronounce that name? Do you see that in the chat?
I'm not going to try. Brumba?
I'm glad I'm not the only one.
I'm gonna vote
We're
for
doing it
Bruno as
justice.
well.
Mark,
Yes.
but what about the Czech Postbellum project? Yes, that's a film. That's a project where that's basically an oral history of the victims of the communist regime. But that's not a fiction film. I believe that was not that's where the question was asked by David. The postbellum project was actually used a lot during the research of this film, but that's what the director said was that they actually delved a lot into the research and watched a lot of these accounts, these sort of conversations with the victims that were recorded in this project, but then they set it aside and then went to the script and worked on their story, just knowing this in the background, so they would know what their characters would be going through mentally and what those experiences were, of course, which were incredibly harsh. Well, Josh, what did you think about Karel, Me and You, just so in comparison with these two films? Hopefully there were somewhere in the audience, there are people who actually saw both, because this festival had 7 films. And so I sorry, I got a question here from Irena Kovarova. So, but first, Josh, please.
Sure. Yeah, I really enjoyed the film. It definitely reminded me of Mumblecore was the first thing that came to mind, and then Ramsey and some of those films. But I thought it was really refreshing to see that generally here in the States, I feel like some of the films that we get from Europe tend to not be the comedies. Comedies don't always relate to different audiences because of cultural context. But I thought it was a super relatable film that anyone can kind of understand who have gone through those periods and gone through romantic turmoils. So I thought it was definitely really relatable and refreshing, because I feel like a lot of the narratives we see, at least the bigger films that come through festivals, are World War II narratives or dealing with the aftermath of that. So it was really refreshing to see a more contemporary take.
Do you think that for the American audiences, the appeal, why actually is it that those are the films that usually have some kind of historical background or are very historical sort of period films that deal with World War II or something that is a little more known? Why do you think that it's so popular with distributors or with audiences in America? Or is it popular with American audiences?
I think so. I mean, I think it's a little bit of what trickles down from the festival ecosystem. So what's getting programmed at Berlin and Cannes, perhaps, and then that's kind of what the distributors are most interested in. Those kind of have stamps of success written on them. But I think, yeah, they do tend to be popular genres at art house cinemas in the US for whatever reason. Nick, maybe you have some more insight into that.
I mean, I think I'll pick up where you sort of led me, and I feel like a lot of it has to do with the awards season cycle, and that tends to be when we see a lot of these larger festival hits sort of filter through our art houses, and generally, what's going to even be considered for those awards is it's not going to be comedies. It's almost always going to be things that are based in historical tragedies or sweeping dramatic narratives. And yeah, for better or for worse, you're not going to see a lot of lighter, pleasant fare.
But neither.
Not to say that those films aren't pleasant.
But neither we get to see films like Old Timers or Karel, You and Me, because somehow that's they barely even get to festivals internationally, and that's sort of the sad part about that. So I will read the question from Mirek. Mirek Konvalina, he says, you have mentioned on Facebook that you watched the movie in Karlovy Vary Film Festival. How was it received, and what does it mean for Czech new films that there will be no Karlovy Vary Film Festival this year? Well, I think it's, I'll answer the last part of the question. The fact that there is no Karlovy Vary Film Festival this year would be really sad, especially for the Czech audiences, because it's a very important international film festival, and the variety of the films that are presented at the festival is just incredibly wide and strong, and I really enjoy going to Karlovy Vary Festival because it's the atmosphere and the audience is incredible, and then you really get to cherry pick from films that were presented at world festivals, and also the competition is very strong, and the premieres like this film that like Old Timers that premiered at the festival last year are getting stronger and stronger. But this for Czech cinema, Karlovy Vary also is a fantastic platform for the film industry, and there is a very strong film industry element at the festival that brings people from around the world, a lot of people from America, a lot of people from around Europe and even Asia that come and watch films especially for the Central and Eastern European element, or even the section that is sort of beyond that. So that's films from, it's the section called East of the West. There is European filmmakers, young filmmakers presented there, like Ondřej, now I forget his last name, whose film was just presented at in the Global Film Festival that was presented on YouTube in lieu of the canceled festivals. And so that the film is a great platform for films from Czech Republic and from the entire region, and the festival is just I strongly recommend to you to both of you to go and experience this, because I believe that you do have programming. You, for instance, I know, Nick, you're really a great fan of the film Dogs Don't Wear Pants.
Yeah.
Which is a genre film, sort of, and it was a Czech co-production. It's not a Czech film, Czech director, but there's a Czech actress, and but there are films from the region that make it to festivals, and that they are incredibly attractive even to programmers in America. And I think that it's something that it's hard to imagine to make all those choices, but at the same time, being Czech, it's always sad to see that films like that don't get the platform.
I think it's interesting that you bring up that film, because I think it's an example of a title that unfortunately did not get a theatrical release in the US at all. It did play some festivals. I saw it at Fantastic Fest in Austin, Texas, but it was, I think, just because of, I personally thought that it was a film that could have found an audience. It probably was a midnight movie audience, not a let's play it 5 times a day audience. But it, for better or for worse, got picked up by Shudder, a streaming network, and was already, delivered streaming to your home before there was any opportunity for anyone to even program it for a one-off.
Yeah, I actually have a question to the audience. Please respond to us in the chat. Before we started, we had this talk about virtual cinema, what's happened with this pandemic, how people sort of were stuck at home and having to fill in their cinephilic needs via streaming. And I was just wondering how many of you have picked that up, and how you were, are you sort of curious if this is going to survive? Would you actually still watch films in this virtual way even when cinemas reopen? And how much do you actually follow world cinema, in cinema, you yourself in America? That's a question to the audience here. Mirek said that he's happy that the Czech Film Festival was online in the US and Canada. And I think that it is a possibility. And I did watch a lot of films also for the purpose to support the cinemas. And I was picking cinemas all across the country to those that I wanted to support. And did you, Nick, did you do virtual cinema during the pandemic?
Yeah, we have been, I think, balancing about between 4 and 5 titles a week, with some holdovers. Trying not to do too many at once. I know some art houses out there have 15 or more titles at a time. Feels a little overwhelming, if for our audience, in my opinion. I personally have been beginning to dip my toes into some of the virtual festival offerings. Like I had a really wonderful experience a couple of weeks ago with the Chattanooga Film Festival, which was the first festival that I had tried out. And then I did some of the We Are One festival that you had mentioned, and I've planning to do the Cinema de Marché, or the Marché de Cinema, Marché du Film. There we are. We got it. the Cannes market, followed by AFI Docs. So that's what's on my slate for now. I'm enjoying it. It in the festival context, it sort of presents something that feels normal and familiar, which is really helpful during this time.
So I will read some responses. So Paul Bernstein says, I enjoyed seeing online the documentary about your singer, Chernova. I don't know that singer, I'm afraid. So, but that's fantastic to see that people do find Czech films online as well. And there are actually quite a lot of platforms that provide American viewers the possibility to see the films. We did the Czech comedy series with the Czech Center online, and that all of those films that we presented were possible to see in America and are still available. Michael Michal Polacek said, I definitely prefer to see the Czech Film Festival movies in person, attend some of them in-person Q&A sessions with the directors and actors. I must admit that I relate to Michael. I really miss the cinema and the live experience, but I also understand that for cinemas it will be a very difficult life. Starting reopening, there'll be limitations, and also travel for filmmakers to come. It will be hard for them to actually come in person to appear in their cinema. And I actually experienced this once myself, where our filmmaker, to whom I dedicated a retrospective that toured in Europe, could not finally join. And I must say that the Q&A in the cinema virtually was not bad at all. It was actually a really great experience. So it's something that I'm really missing real life, but I understand that there will be limitations. So what did you show, Josh, in your virtual cinema? Did you have virtual cinema with your?
Yep, we've had a virtual cinema basically since the end of March. And I think there was, as Nick mentioned, kind of a gold rush, and people were so excited about this new idea and these opportunities. So it was very enticing to grab up all these amazing movies that were offered. So we are a much smaller organization than SIF. So we're offering about 3 a week, including this weekend, we're opening G-Kid's new animated film, Morona's Fantastic Tale. Mm-hmm. So offering a wide variety of things, and it's really, I think it offers a lot of exciting opportunities looking towards the future. Obviously, we all believe in the power of watching movies together in a room, but people can't always attend. So I think that virtual cinema is something that's going to be here to stay, and perhaps offer audiences who aren't able to get to the cinema for whatever reason a chance to maybe see things that they missed, or screen time's always tight, so perhaps something plays for a week in the theater and then the following week it's available online. So I think there's a lot of really exciting possibilities, especially for smaller theaters that don't have as many screens to play with, that we'll be able to perhaps show some things that we weren't able to and be a little bit more adventurous with our programming.
I failed to answer one part of Nick's question, which was, what was the response to Alzheimer's at the festival? And I must say that not only at the festival, and in Karlovy Vary, the Alzheimer's, the response was immediately very positive. And the critics chose the film at the end of their at the end of the year as the best Czech film of the year, in competition with The Painted Bird, which is a film that was actually acquired for distribution in the United States, and after the pandemic is over, it will actually enter the cinemas in America. It's based on the Kozinski book, famous book, Painted Bird, and the Painted Bird won all the Czech Film Academy Awards, but the actors actually received both the critics and the Academy Awards, and that was actually fantastic to see. The film Karelia Ati was also incredibly well received, especially by the critics, and they gave the film the Discovery of the Year award, and so it's quite exciting to see this sort of variety that is coming into Czech cinema. It's also wonderful to see filmmakers who were not born in Czech Republic but made Czech Republic their home also making their mark. There was one film in a Chilean film in this series, the Czech film, but there is absolutely fantastic Russian animator Daria Kacheva, who won the student Oscar and was nominated for in the big Oscar competition at the Academy. There is a wonderful Slovenian filmmaker, Olmo Omerzu, who actually works with the same producer that produced Old Timers, Jiří Konečný, and his film Fireflies. I'm sorry. It's called Všechno bude in Czech, and I always Winterflies. Sorry, Winterflies is the film, and that was actually presented in Toronto Film Festival. The Painted Bird also made its North American premiere at the Toronto Film Festival last year, and it was very well received. And of course, the fact that it received a distribution, which doesn't happen very often for Czech films, let me tell you, is exceptional. One of the films that was distributed for acquired for distribution in America is Jan Hřebejk's film The Teacher, which I believe one of you may have seen also. It's Jan Hřebejk is actually one of the most popular Czech film directors for American distributors, apart from Jan Schwankmajer, who's also one of the sort of staples of Czech cinema in on American screens.
I think I saw today.
Talked about.
I think I saw today. I didn't see it today, but I saw that it should be released in theaters in July. So definitely people can keep an eye out for that.
I did see that as well in the art house conversions.
Okay, yeah. Great. So what was that? What's your reaction to that?
I'm surprised, to be honest, that Kino is taking the risk of picking up that film, because speaking of a film that is not a comedy, it is beautiful, however, quite daunting to get through. Yeah.
Just what's your take?
I haven't seen the film yet, although I'm very excited to, and I'm glad that it's getting the chance to get US distribution, and I hope as many theaters are open as possible so it can be seen by a wide audience.
Yes, it's actually picked up by IFC Films, which is
it's IFC. You're right. It's IFC, not Kino.
That is extremely unusual. I don't remember there was ever a film by this company, and it's something that sort of speaks to the that's a topic that Americans would probably know. It's The Painted Bird, best-selling book, and so it's the distributors are betting on that, and so we hope that the American audiences will be drawn to the film as much as the international community at the festivals and in the film industry. Well, I think Michael had a point here. He said that online streaming is certainly better than nothing, which I must agree that is true. But I hope that we will all be able to see each other in cinema, in a real cinema pretty soon. And do you have any sort of closing remarks, any of you, before we wrap it up?
It was such a pleasure to be able to watch these two Czech films, and I hope I continue to get that pleasure, whether at festivals or virtual cinemas or in person, or doing Q&As like this. So I just want to thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of it.
Oh, great. And what about you, Nick, from Seattle?
I would say that if I had seen both of these films at TIFF, they probably would have really stuck with me. And I think it's a shame that I didn't get that advance. I'm so happy to have this opportunity to be able to see them. And it's such a shame that I didn't have the opportunity to see them at a festival, because they would have not only stuck with me, but they probably would have been something that I would have considered showing in our smallest screen, which generally is a place where we only do weekend runs. So I would say there's not like a huge audience in Seattle for these films, but they're so pleasurable. And thank you for exposing me to them and for including me in tonight's chat.
Maybe you should think about showing films that don't have distributors.
I thought about starting a distribution company to distribute some of these films, but that's maybe where you come in.
I mean, that's certainly something that we did at the Northwest Film Center in Portland. I'm not sure that SIF is there yet.
Well, we will hope that there will be more people who will take a chance, and I really am very glad that you took the time to watch them. Thank you.